Hi again, everybody. Welcome into another edition. This is Cross Functionality, the show connecting coaching, baseball, softball, male, female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. Thank you for making us a part of your day on the audio side, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube, the Softball Strength Academy YouTube page. And today on episode 45, our main topic talking about thinking along with the pitcher in both baseball and softball. There are some small subtleties, some similarities, and some differences as well. We'll get into it. Let me bring in my friend, co-host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama. She's very chippy today, and she's a current day renowned coach. She's at the beach today, but also I'm pretty sure she's happy because LSU won the College World Series. Cassie
Yes,
Reilly-Boccia.
they did.
Yeah.
You know what? That was a fun World Series to watch. Either
Oh,
way,
yeah.
that was, the second game Florida played. I was like, "Holy cow, they're making this a game!" I didn't think they would make it a series. So that was a fun series to watch for sure.
Now, were you on the edge of your seat? I don't think you were really on the edge of your seat, or as intense as it would be, say, if Alabama was on, and
Correct.
or when they were on during the softball tournament. So it was a little bit different, but
It
certainly
was
your
just
hatred, as you talked about last week, and go back in the archives and listen to that, your hatred for the University of Florida, for the Gators, probably
yep.
probably pushed you a little bit harder as a fan last
It was,
weekend.
it was one of those I got to just follow and enjoy, and yeah, it's honestly either way, good for baseball. I think they broke records for viewing,
Yeah,
and
they did.
so I think it's good for college baseball all around.
It was a lot of fun to watch too. And the passion, the intensity with those kids. It was really a lot of fun. And just I'm looking around, seeing just on that field how many future big leaguers we could be seeing within the next few years. I've got two of them in mind, and there's a couple there with Florida that are really really talented. So I always, like to, when I do watch the College World Series in years past, I always like to see who has a shot to make it to the big leagues, who
Mm.
really stands out, because all those players, and this playing in the SEC, and baseball, softball, any sport in the SEC, or any sport when you get to that level, the tournament level, World Series type level, they're all really gifted and exceptionally talented. And sometimes you wonder how all of those kids don't get drafted. And then you sort of notice the subtle differences. But um, it's just fun to watch, just possibly see future professional players, and then future big leaguers as well. And I think that Major League Baseball made the right decision in pushing back the MLB draft to give these kids a chance to sort of breathe a little bit, and in a way sign a little bit later and then go right to instructional league, rather than just getting drafted in June, getting done with college baseball, and then heading off to the training complex, and then eventually being assigned to a team. So I think that it kind of aligns, the timing of it, the timeline sort of aligns with everybody, not just college, but also high school kids as well. So MLB draft is coming up. That'll be a lot of fun. Do you have anybody at the academy that you are currently coaching
We have a
that
few
has a
that
shot?
are on people's radar. Yeah, so we
Hmm.
had I think we had 3 get drafted last year, and, it's funny because 5, 6 years ago, we had our first guy get drafted, which I spoke about a few weeks ago, who's,
Yeah.
he got picked up by the Nationals actually now. He's not with Tampa Bay, he's with the Nationals now, and Joe's been pitching really well.
Hmm.
So it is just it's very special to see a journey of an athlete, especially someone who you don't just see the end product, right? So many of these athletes we get to see on TV, we get to see them polished in a game, but when you get to see an athlete go through the day in and day out, the difficulty of being here in the winter, of training indoors for the 6 months out of the year, and then you see them have that success, it's a different kind of special. So we do have a couple of guys that I think are on some MLB radars.
Hmm.
I think whether or not they decide to go with the team that drafts them, or whether they continue on to college, will be, dependent on where they get picked. But yeah, I will. Whenever that does happen, I will keep you posted.
Yes, please do. And by the way, you can follow the Softball Strength Academy YouTube page to watch the show. And also, we are on Apple, Google, Spotify. Follow us on social media at Matt Jim Tara, and Cassie is at Coach_Cassie RB on Instagram, at Coach Cassie RB on Twitter. And today we're talking episode 45 about thinking along with the pitcher. Jake Epstein and I on the Lab Epstein Hitting podcast talk so much about that magic word. It's become the word of both podcasts, really. And that word is having a plan, or phrase, I guess, having a
Mhm.
plan up there at the plate, and having an approach. There's that magic word, having the approach at the plate. And part of that approach is thinking along with the pitcher. But there are some subtle differences that you and I were talking about off mic about baseball and softball players when it comes to thinking along with the pitcher. There are those similarities and differences, but both are very subtle, and there's a fine line you're walking when you're talking about those two differences, thinking along with the pitcher, both baseball and softball.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I grew up in softball. I played softball. So much of what I originally started to coach was softball. And then when I met my business partner who was coming in from the baseball end for the last 9 years, now I've been able to run parallel with working with some baseball players and diving into that sport a lot more. So it is neat to see, hey, guess what? A rise ball and softball is actually very, very similar approach as a hitter to a high spin rate fastball that you're facing, or the slider is really what we call a drop curveball, or just little things like that, or a cutter is going to be very similar to a screwball. So there are these similarities, but I think maybe most people think softball, oh, the uniqueness lies in the rise ball. I actually think the uniqueness lies way more in the distance that the pitch is thrown. The fact that when a hitter moves around in the batter's box, it is going to now impact those 43 feet way more than it would impact the what am I blanking? 60. What's exactly the
60,
90?
60 feet 6 inches. Yeah.
There you go. I knew it wasn't exactly 60, but so it's gonna those like 2 or 3 feet in the batter's box are gonna make a bigger difference on the 43 feet than it is on the 60 feet. So just little things like that. That pop up are just interesting to note. That again, why you can't train hitters exactly the same, but there are the similarities that you can have the crossover with.
You almost think that with thinking along with the pitcher, sometimes you might overthink, and sometimes players get into trouble with that. I was one to overthink, and I'm not sure if you were the same way, but overthinking, really, to me, it causes could cause a lot of problems, right?
Oh
So
gosh.
I wonder with you and with professional players out there, or just players listening in general, how you guys go about thinking along with the pitcher, but not overthinking, and sort of just going with what your gut says, going with certain trends. And if you get fooled, you get fooled. I guess there the insecurity goes away, because now you're not afraid to get fooled at the plate. If it happens, it happens, but I'm not going to deviate away from my approach.
Sure. I think this goes back to so much of the awareness of yourself as a hitter, and that you talked about insecurities and that confidence, because so many times we'll start to overthink when we're in a slump or when things are not going well, and we're starting to like lean on this overthinking as a crutch to be like, this is what I have to do because I have to do something to get myself out of this. When you can start to take a step back and be like, wait a second, this is not productive thinking that's going on right now, or approach planning, I should say. This is my anxieties coming through. Then you can start to have a much more mature approach to thinking along with the pitcher. This goes back to the very fine and difficult line of growing up in your sport as a hitter and being like, wait a second, I've been able to get away with just not thinking and crushing it. That's what's going to work for me. You have to understand that is going to work off of mediocre pitching and
Yeah.
not the best of the best pitching. And that when you do start to face a difficult pitcher day in and day out, when you as a hitter are on film and now pitchers can have a very specific plan against you, this is the type of chess that needs to get involved in your plan.
So many times people ask, and parents ask this too: how does my kid get to the next level? Well, number one, he has to be, he or she, they have to be talented enough, and most likely they're not. But number two, when you look at the players at the next level, or you're playing against players at the high school level that are going on to play at a high-end college program, or just going on to play, say, a high-end Division One, or Division 2, high-end Division 2, both baseball and softball, you notice a difference in that player's approach. If they're a pitcher, say for episode purposes, topic purposes today, when they're pitching, you can tell that they're not just locked in, and that they do the things they need to do correctly, physically, repeating their mechanics, but they're mentally on a different level. It's a different sphere. And you kind of figure out what that is when they go on to the next level. It's the fact that they are having a mental plan and an approach, and they don't deviate from that. And
Mm.
hitters, a lot of times with hitters, it's the same way, obviously, just inverted. But that's when they're at lower levels, and then you're going on to the next level. And that's what really stands out when you're before they get to that next level.
Right. And a plan and approach is not okay, I need to be thinking about my mechanics at the plate. Cause I think that is also a disconnect sometimes where people are like, oh, well, what do you have to be thinking at the plate at that next level? It's, very similar to studying for a test versus cramming for the test. And I think I've mentioned this before. You try to cram 5 minutes before you go into your test, then all of a sudden you're going to be overthinking a question because you didn't actually learn it and you didn't actually
Right.
practice it. But if you actually know the material, a test becomes very easy. It's as you're reading the question, even if it's multiple choice, the answer, you already know it. It pops in your head. So your plan, your approach, because you've practiced it, because you've worked on it so much in your game plan off the tee, off front toss, off of leading up to that game, you're in the box and you just know it. You're not overthinking in the box then. And I think that is also a big distinction too that people don't realize.
So people are probably wondering, when you were playing in your playing days at the University of Alabama, Crimson Tide, and you were playing some of the best of the best. You mentioned, last week you guys would struggle a lot with Florida, for example,
Mm.
the Gators, but you beat up on everybody else throughout the country. When you were going up to the plate and you had this plan and approach, and something went completely wrong, or it went the other way and your approach was way off, how did you make those in-game adjustments, you personally and also your team as well? Because sometimes, thinking along with the pitcher, we're not mind readers. We can, we can study trends and scouting reports and video and film and data, but sometimes it doesn't always line up correctly the way we want it to.
Sure. And listen, sometimes umpires are going to throw it off too, because
Right, right. Good point.
when we go into a game, we're asking, okay, what's the pitcher going to try to throw for a strike? What's she going to try to throw as her waist pitch when she's ahead? We're trying to figure out all these different things. Is she someone who goes right at people? Is she someone who has high pitch counts? Whatever it may be. All of a sudden you get in the game and her pitch she normally throws really well for a strike is completely different that day. And maybe because she's made the adjustment, or maybe the umpire is giving, a ball and a half off the plate. And now, we have to make those adjustments. So it's not a completely unique uh thing that just pops up when you start to make these in-game adjustments. It's almost like, listen, we've faced pitchers like this before. We've faced scenarios like this. So you have almost like a bucket of, hey, sitting on a hard outside pitch,
Mhm.
seeing a ball down, moving up in the box to attack a low drop ball. Like there's buckets of things that you have already practiced and already worked on. And so when you make the adjustment, you're really just pivoting into a different lane that you've practiced. I would almost consider it similar to a quarterback calling an audible.
Sure.
It's not
Yeah.
like there's something, it's not like a play that they've never heard of. It's like, hey, we're running this one now. So that is, I mean, that might be the best way to try to explain an approach to someone who really doesn't grasp it. Is it is a play like in football. You have a playbook of approaches, let's say, that you've
Mhm.
practiced and have nailed down. And through the guidance of what the coaches are seeing and what maybe the lineup has seen the first time through, that's how then you make the adjustment and you call it a different play.
In past episodes, you talked about how you used to prepare, or almost follow along with the pitcher at home, and
Mm.
you prepare that way for games. You did that in high school. I'm sure you did that in college as well. Old school kind of charting, if you will, charting before charting really became a thing at various levels with all the new technology. But how did you prepare away, and pick your brain a little bit here? How did you prepare away from the field for those pitchers to get yourself ready to have a plan, have an approach, and be able to successfully think along with those pitchers? What was your process like? You're studying like up to that series or up to that next game.
So, when I remember my first couple of years, I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna watch a pitcher and watch, because I never had this much data on a pitcher. Like I never got to watch, as you get to college, all of a sudden they play 15 games on ESPN. You have so much information to watch. So I was just watching everything. But then as I got older, I started to look at, okay, how does she throw lefties, and specifically how does she throw lefty hitters? Because in softball, there's so many lefties that are slap hitters, crafty bunters. Like it's a completely different position essentially on offense. I was just a very traditional, slow lefty hitter. I wasn't going to
Yeah.
be bunting or slapping or surprising anyone. So I would look and see how does she throw those hitters. And I would just watch those at bats, and I would have a strike zone. So I would draw out a strike zone with the 9 slots,
Mhm.
and I would just put an X if it was a strike and a circle if it was a ball, like where around the zone it was. And then all of a sudden you watch, 10, 12 at bats, and you're like, this X has been popping up. This X is getting very dark because I keep putting it in that same spot.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking in my head, okay, this general area is where she wants to attack, or where she's comfortable at least attacking hitters. Because as much as a hitter would like to flatter themselves and think that a pitcher is going to have this very, very unique plan for each hitter, which to an extent she will, she is still going to pitch to her strengths, right? If she doesn't throw a screwball very well, she's probably not going to all of a sudden just try to throw like one of her worst pitches to a good hitter. You get what I mean? So she's going to try to
Yeah.
play it into her strengths as well. So that was the first step to me being like, okay, this is the pitch I'm probably going to want to attack. And then similarly, that circle of where she was wasting would start to get really dark too. And I could start to try to visualize, okay, I'm going to visualize taking that particular pitch. And then I wanted to see how she got uncomfortable. Did she get uncomfortable when a hitter was crowding the plate? Did she get uncomfortable when the hitter was up in the box? Because my very first, let's say my plan, I want it to be on top of the plate. Like I wanted to crowd the plate, make her really uncomfortable, but she didn't throw first pitch strikes rarely ever. Well, my first pitch or my first pitch that I was going to see from her, I was going to do something very obtuse to what my approach was to try to throw her off. So I was going to stand off the plate, up in the box, something like that, knowing that really wasn't the pitch I was looking for, especially my first at bat. And now in her head, she's like, all right, this girl's up in the box off the plate. I get out after my first pitch and now I get boom, right back on the plate. And now I'm doing something different. I'm just trying to make her very uncomfortable, I guess, And again, you want to do that within the confines of not making yourself overly uncomfortable. But that was kind of like the game within the game, I guess, that you could start to play.
Well, the game within the game, that might be the phrase of the show, because you mentioned we've mentioned throughout the audibles and the pitcher pitching to her strengths, but then you factor into what the catcher might see and within the game and with hitters, and what the catcher may think in attacking that hitter. So there's a lot of cat and mouse going on and a lot of moving parts. And for a hitter, I think that because of all those moving parts, if you move away from your actual approach or your actual plan, you're not thinking along with the pitcher anymore, and you're doing yourself a real disservice.
Right. And it's funny too, because talk about learning from watching the game. I remember sitting at home, 17 years old, watching the World Series, and this player from Arizona State is sitting back in the box. She's a lefty hitter, and she's all the way in the back of the box. And a drop ball is a very prominent pitch in softball, and you could say it's kind of like a curveball, but it really doesn't have, it's a much sharper movement. It's not, there's really, I don't know what the equivalent would be in baseball. Maybe
slider,
maybe a sinker, maybe something that
sinker.
Maybe drops off the table, but from an underhand position, a ball that like almost looks like it's coming up to then come down. So anyway, so she's in the back of the box. The pitcher goes into her windup, and I've never seen anything like it. It was almost like a Happy Gilmore drill this hitter did. She put feet together, feet apart, and so all of a sudden this pitcher is trying to throw a pitch to make it to the hitter in the back of the box so it crosses her plane to be a strike. And it's because the batter just moved up, it's going to be flat essentially when she crosses, and she crushed a home run on the center field wall. And I was like so mind blown. I was like, to be able to have be a good enough hitter to be able to have that as a tool in your repertoire, to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to guess she's throwing a drop ball here. I'm going to guess it's going to be flat if I move up the 3 feet in the box right now. It was one of the coolest things. And that's, it's not the most common thing. I'm not saying every hitter does it in softball, but I've never really seen something like that. Maybe Ichiro tried something like that one time in baseball, but it's really not something I've seen happen in baseball much.
No, you're exactly right. And I do wonder when it comes to baseball, and then of course when it comes to softball, how much the catcher plays into. I know how much it does in baseball. Softball, though, how much the catcher plays into that pitcher's approach in attacking that hitter, and how now that hitter has to understand even further what the game plan might be now, changing at bat to at bat, right?
For sure. So something about the stance, right? Open stance, closed stance, back of the box, front of the box. What's a shame is I don't know if baseball's turned into it. Softball has predominantly turned into everyone's wearing a wristband, and the coach.
I think I've noticed that in baseball. I've noticed at the college level.
Not at pros, right. But the dugout coach is calling a pitch. Everyone is able to look, see exactly what the pitch is, and then here comes the pitch. Now, when we were in college, our pitching coach from the dugout, it really depended. There might have been a series of 3 batters that our pitching coach, Stephanie Van Brakel, would be like, hey, listen, we have a really specific approach. We can see something going on. I'm going to call these next 3 batters, whatever it may be. And then there might be another time where the catcher would come in, have the conversation, be like, listen, I'm seeing something. I feel like I can call. And then there'd be times where the pitching coach would call, and it was up to the catcher if she was going to take the suggestion or not. But it was funny because I don't know if it happens in baseball as much, but softball, there's a lot of picking signs. There's a lot of trying to pick the pitch. And so our pitching coach would call all the time. And 50% of the time, she didn't matter at all because the catcher was going to call it anyway. So,
Right.
it was one of those things. I do miss I just feel like catchers are so smart and can like really call a game well, but in the same breath, the amount of technology and information, I guess, that comes in and that is available, like how much easier is it for a coach to have a book in front of them, essentially calling, like figuring out that information versus having to have it, stuck in a catcher's brain. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. A part of me misses a catcher being able to call, but maybe there is too much information now to hold it all in a catcher's head.
So what kind of adjustments did you make at the plate when you had to, and then change your approach and think along with the pitcher?
Sure. So, I mean, I used to love crowding the plate. I would love trying to challenge the hitter to say, you have to thread a needle to throw me a perfect inside pitch without hitting me. And if she threw anywhere else over the plate, it's my advantage now. Now an outside pitch looks essentially down the middle. I would practice staying on the plate. And then, if she could throw that, let's say she was like, hell yeah, I'm throwing that inside pitch, especially as a lefty, right? If you have a right-handed pitcher trying to throw a curveball inside to a lefty, she's got to be really good to not let it run and hit you. But let's say she was, because there definitely was people that were there. I would be on top of the plate, knowing I was stepping in the bucket. So knowing I was stepping into an open stance, only looking inside, trying to hit right center field gap. And if that worked, then my second at bat, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going back on the plate, but now I'm not moving, because a smart pitcher would be like, I'm not going to throw inside again. So, sometimes that worked, sometimes it backfired, and it obviously didn't fall into my hands the way I wanted it to. Of course not, right? Nobody bats 1,000, but I think just the knowing, like, okay, I'm gonna try. It's a boxing match. It's like, I'm gonna try this. Oh, they blocked my punch there. Okay, let me try this. And it's or an off-speed pitch, and knowing like, okay, I'm going to maybe widen out and move up in the box slightly to try to help me stay back and not be too far over my front side, or just little things like that. I used to really enjoy, because it wasn't just a battle with the pitcher, it was a battle with the pitch caller, right? Whoever that ended up being. And I think that is, those are intricacies that I never really appreciated or truly learned until I got to that collegiate level. But I think if athletes who are watching the game and can start to get exposed to some of that in the earlier stages of travel ball or competitive high school ball, then you're just going to be that much more equipped to call those audibles and make those adjustments come game time.
So let's take me through. The audience may be wanting to know this, big chunk of them. Take me through what your approach was before a game when you're going into the on deck circle. Let's say you're batting third. So you're coming up top of the first inning. You're on the road against the Gators, against Florida. You're coming up. You're batting third, batting in the first inning. What was your approach? What was your just overall evergreen approach that you were taking to that first at bat? Forget the adjustments that are going to be made later. What was your overall approach as you're in the on-deck circle, or just thinking along with the pitcher? Because again, when you're in the on-deck circle, forget the warm-ups. We talked about that in previous episodes. The physical warm-ups don't really do too much. You have to be thinking along with that pitcher, creating a plan and understanding the pitcher's tendencies. Actually watching the game, right? Instead of just doing weird warm-up drills. What was your approach and your plan like in the on-deck circle so that you were successful in your first plate appearance when you went up there and thinking along with the pitcher?
Sure. So most of the pitchers I faced for Florida were hard throwing screwball type pitchers, right? So let's pretend that was the case. If I got up to the plate and there was a scenario where we were no outs, runner on second, something where it would have been beneficial for me as a lefty to hit it to the right side, I would get on the plate, crowd the plate, and I would do my approach where I'm hoping she forfeits her screwball because I'm on top of the plate and I'm going to step in the bucket, hope she throws me in and gets something to the pull side. Because second and third, even if it's a fly ball to right field, whatever it may be, I'm trying to score a run to the pull side. Let's say I get up and nobody's on, there's 2 outs and I'm looking to get a base hit here. I might still be on the plate, but now I'm not budging. Now I'm really trying to attack that screwball that she's throwing towards the outside part of the plate for me. So that's like the first pitch. If you're looking at like a flow chart, right? It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to work with, and what adjustment did she throw a strike? Yes, no.
Yeah.
What happens next? So that was the approach. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it needed to be too much more difficult than that. And a hard throwing screwball outside pitcher, you're trying to or in my case, I was trying to let it get deep because I typically went out and got screwballs too soon. If you're a hitter who lets an outside pitch get too deep, you're going to have a completely different approach than I did. But something where I was just visualizing that my bat leading the ball right into the opposite field gap, a nice smooth 80% swing.
80%, yes. Never 100%.
It didn't work for me. Never worked for me.
What was an example of times that you changed your approach in game, or they had to change to think along with the pitcher? Again, I mentioned approach a lot in the episode because it ties in with thinking along with the pitcher. So how did you go about changing your approach in game, second to third to fourth plate appearance?
So perfect example was we played the national championship game. We played a really hard throwing lefty pitcher. First game we got beat. Second game we decided to be on the plate, up in the box, which almost like trying to face Randy Johnson. That's like what you're trying to face, right? And it made her so uncomfortable. She ended up hitting like I got hit by a pitch twice in that second game. So of course, third game, hell yeah, we're coming back doing the exact same thing. And she made an adjustment where now she was able to thread the needle. She was locating her changeup extremely well. So we took a completely different approach our second time through the lineup, backed up in the box just a hair, gave a little space, and now we were trying to attack that inside pitch. So maybe a little bit of an open stance. Something I actually have seen Oklahoma do a lot, and I don't know obviously what's going on in their brain, but I've noticed when it seems like they're sitting inside pitch, their bat, instead of being like all the way loaded where the knob is facing the catcher's mitt in this cocked position with their wrist, it almost looks like they flatten out just a little bit, not a lot, nothing crazy, to almost cheat to get quicker to the inside pitch. And I watched
they did that recently. I'm sorry, it's a great story, but they did that.
I saw this recently at the World Series. So if I was going back in time and able to do that, I probably would have cheated a little bit with something like that. But essentially, all the cheats you can think of for an inside pitch, where you're like trying to maybe be slightly open, maybe you're just trying to think quick to the ball to try to hit a hard inside pitch at that point.
Yeah. All right. I think we covered everything today when it comes to thinking along with the pitcher. Episode 45. Thank you for joining us today. Again, subscribe, leave a review, Apple, Google, Spotify, or on the Softball Strength Academy YouTube page. And also email us, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Episode 46 coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. We appreciate you. Did I miss anything? I'm trying to think. We did the email, Gmail account.
Twitter, Instagram, got both the underscore non.
That's right. I started a new streak last week. I think we got everything. I think we're all good to go. If you want to be a sponsor, emails too, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Episode 46 next week. Thank you for joining us. We will talk to you then.